front pages on this Wednesday morning. Here's how they stack up.
The Telegraph says Sunak should be ousted if the Tories wish to survive the election. Guardian
leads with the Prime Minister warning of growing attacks in Yemen as tensions in the region rise.
Top story for the FT, Israel defying ceasefire calls in Gaza.
The Independent's investigation showed 30 NHS mental health workers being suspended for malpractice.
And The Sun leads with the Barnaby, the mother of killed students in Nottingham. The mother of one of those, Barnaby, has slammed her son's killer.
And that is the saddest story that you'll see in a long time. Joining us to debate that and much, much more, we have husband and wife team of Claire Purcell and Nigel Nelson. Thank you both very much indeed. Claire, let's begin with this Nottingham killing. And yesterday, I tell you, it's very rare that I would be affected by a news story, but I watched this yesterday and it just brought a tear to my eye. Grace O'Malley's Kumar's brother, talking about how his life was over because he's lost his sister and how his parents' life is ruined and his life for the rest of his... as long as he lives, he just won't be able to get over this. But the killer, tell us about the fate that he received.
Well, this chap, Valdo Kalakani, has been not charged with murder, but manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. And I think you're right when you say it does affect you. And I think it affected me more when it was Grace's father who gave the most gracious but heart-wrenching speech, who said, justice has not been done for my daughter and her friend. He wanted the killer to go down with a murder charge, but unfortunately it was decided that he would be done for manslaughter. And it's such a categorical mistake by so many agencies when you read through the chances that they had to catch Valdo, to admit him into a psychiatric hospital, which he had been in previously. Former flatmates had expressed concerns. He had been given the name of a serial killer, but he was allowed to be roaming around the university town, the university that he graduated from, in spite of all of this, and nobody stepped in, nobody dealt with it. And it just beggars belief that 3 lives, 2 very young lives, and there's another chap whose van was taken to then go and kill other people, have had their lives taken away by this individual.
Well, you say an individual, he's a paranoid schizophrenic as well, and he had 2 names in court. Which struck me as, like, you know, just the irony upon irony. Nigel, well, what's your take on this?
Well, I mean, I think that you were right first time round. It is certainly the saddest story of the day. And the kind of feeling is that these things happen. There are people out there just like this with mental health issues. And so the result is you just never know when and where you're safe, which I think is always the most scary part. Because these killings were completely random. And on the basis of that, that could happen anywhere. I mean, fortunately, we've got gun control in this country, so we don't have the kind of massacres very often that you see in America. But it's still a scary story because it could be any one of us.
Yeah, and the details of it, his former flatmate saying it was a ticking time bomb and one girl jumping out of the window to escape him. And then the story of heroism, of how Grace actually intervened and tried to protect Barnaby Webber whilst he was being stabbed to death. She had the opportunity to run and could have escaped death herself, and she stayed and heroically tried to rescue him, and then suffered a brutal
but the big question is, why is he not facing murder charges? That's the question.
Well, I guess, I mean, the law is the law. If 3 psychiatrists have said that he's a paranoid schizophrenic, then he does have grounds for diminished responsibility.
That's right. That's basically right. I mean, because he's got mental health problems, he can plead a diminished responsibility. I mean, it doesn't mean that he won't get quite a long time behind bars, but obviously he's treated differently than he would be if he was done for murder.
But I think he's sectioned anyway, won't he, for life?
It's the perception of murder and then manslaughter with diminished responsibility doesn't seem to fit the crimes that have taken place. It feels a lesser charge, even though he will get a substantial sentence, it still doesn't quite cover the horrific nature of what he did.
It's terrible, terrible, terrible story. Should we turn to The Telegraph? Lots of amazing stories coming out of The Telegraph today. But this one is about Lord Cameron, our Foreign Secretary, returning this week to the Middle East. And this is to press for an immediate humanitarian pause in fighting. What are they saying, Claire?
David Cameron, Lord Cameron, is going to go out there to try and get the two-state solution really back on the menu after Benjamin Netanyahu has stated that he wouldn't accept that. Lord Cameron is going out there to try and smooth the wheels to see if that can happen. He's going to go out there and visit Qatar, Israel, Turkey to try and garner the support to look for a humanitarian pause and to see if there is any movement. I mean, Qatar are being quite instrumental in brokering the peace process and have had some success, but we do need a much stronger humanitarian pause. Aid has to be able to get through. And I think that opinion is now forming much more of a ceasefire, even though it still seems so far removed from what's going to happen when you listen to most of the reports coming out of Israel and Gaza. It seems like the last thing that's going to happen. But if, and it's a really big if, David Cameron can get this off the ground, then we are at the start of something which looks like the recovery process within the Middle East.
But can there be a recovery process, Nigel, when, you know, the small print here, Downing Street says Cameron will raise the importance of the two-state solution, just days after President Netanyahu has said there will be no two-state solution?
Well, he sort of... Netanyahu has slightly changed his tune. I think that's under pressure from President Biden. What he's saying is he's prepared to consider a two-state solution provided that Palestine is demilitarised. I find this a bit peculiar. If you decide to turn Palestine into a sovereign state, do you then say to them, but you can't have a standing army or defend yourself or anything like that? And that's where I think there's a tricky bit. I mean, certainly the Israelis, we've been trying for a two-state solution for years and years and got nowhere. They just won't do it. He's come a bit further towards that, which, as I say, sounds like a basis for negotiation. But whether the Palestinians will be able to accept that, I don't know.
Let's talk about the big political story of the day, Claire, and that is Sir Simon Clarke. And he's basically saying to the Conservative Party, so he stood up and said, get rid of Rishi Sunak, or this, as a party, Conservative as a party, will become extinct.
I sat there with my head in my hands last night when this news broke, because you just sort of think, at what point do you think that changing the leader is going to make any difference to this?
And you say this as a Conservative, someone who's advised within the Home Office. Are you still a Tory councillor?
I am not, no, but I'm still a card-carrying member of the Tory party, and it pains me to see these kind of stories come up. The great relief of waking up this morning, it's a very early hour, was no one else has joined in. Simon Clarke is a lone voice. And it is
except the rumour mill is that there are people who were sitting around the cabinet table yesterday morning with the Prime Minister who are contemplating handing in their resignation.
But you get those stories all the time, just about, you know, the same stories about letters going into the 1922 chair, people are going to resign, people are on resignation watch, and you just sort of think, right...
Well, the last time was Robert Jenrick, and it happened a few days later. All the rumours were circling, and boom.
They were, but no one else has resigned. So this hasn't been the kind of downfall
What's
that
Clarke's political ambition? Does he see himself as a leader of the Conservatives?
I think there are an awful lot of people that see themselves as leaders, and it looks a little bit like personal fortunes over party fortunes. What's quite interesting is all of those people that have come out and said, you need to stop this, pipe down at the back, and many other words. Dame Priti Patel is one of those, Sir Liam Fox is another one, Sir David Davis, quite senior Tories. They haven't quite gone as far as saying Rishi Sunak has our support. They are telling Simon Clarke to button it and think of the party, think of the stability of the country. So I think it's quite interesting, the words that are being used. So it's not exactly circling the wagons around Rishi Sunak, it is circling the wagons in a slightly different area that may put them forward for leadership in the future.
There's also another layer to all of this, because obviously there was that shocking poll last Monday, wasn't there? Just the timing, just before the Rwanda bill, which came out basically saying it's going to be an annihilation, it's going to be the worst ever election for the Conservatives. Well, it's this poll that Sir Simon is referring to in his article in The Telegraph today, and you have a theory about who might have been behind the poll.
I do. I think that the one, Simon Clarke, may actually have a hand in this, along with Lord Frost. It just feels a little bit convenient that came out and then was rubbished quite an awful lot of people. And the election guru, Isaac Levido, was in only last week talking to Tory MPs saying about divided parties and that poll is nonsense and there are questions about the data. For it to then be brought up by Simon Clarke saying we're going to be annihilated, it all just seems a little bit cosy.
Yeah, interesting.
Nigel, what should we expect from our councils, from our town councils, our city councils, our what other councils are there?
Parish councils.
There's parish councils. I mean, it's a bit complicated. Unitary authorities. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole host of them.
County councils.
Really, what you need to expect from them is all the services we take for granted, but are terribly important. So it's things like your leisure centres, your schools,
your
bin
bins,
collections,
your social care.
Well, the social care is the one that causes the most problems, but also people are also terribly concerned about the 3 Ps. If you ask any council leader, the 3 Ps are planning, parking and potholes. That's what people really get concerned about. Problem local authorities have got is that the cost of social care has gone shooting up. Trying to deal with homelessness has gone shooting up. In the meantime, the central funding from government has gone down by 27% since 2010.
Central government get off with a lot here, because I think social care should be the responsibility of central government, not county councils.
Well, there's always that. I mean, I think it should be administered, certainly. I mean, the funding should come from central government. It should be administered at a local level, because that's the best way of actually doing it. But at the moment, that council just don't have the money. So what is going to happen if they don't get it is they're going to go bankrupt.
Well, that's why I ask you, what are they being asked to do? For instance, preventing homelessness is now part of their remit as well. And I think this is an essential thing. In any humane society, homelessness should not be tolerated. But is it the responsibility of local government to do it, or the responsibility of central government? And this whole question of funding and who funds.
Yeah, I think local government, having sat for 8 years on a local authority, are best placed in things like homelessness. They know the area, they tend to know the individuals involved, you get the same people coming up. So they really are best placed to do it, but they don't have the funding. And we expect our councils now to provide so much for so little.
But then what I'm saying,
problem.
and the reason I asked Nigel the question in the first place, is do we expect too much? Are there certain things that they should just cut adrift and say, not our problem?
No, I don't think they can. And I don't think they would want to. When you speak to other council leaders, they take it incredibly seriously, their responsibilities, whether they're statutory or whether they are the things you like to have, like libraries, which we think are important. But it isn't really that sort of a statutory responsibility. But councils want to be able to provide. They take money off individuals every single month in council tax, and they want to provide the best service they can for the majority.
Yeah, for the majority. But then you have these councils that are going under, have gone under. I'm thinking Woking Borough Council and the chief execs have gone off to retire on insane final salary schemes for all eternity, and meanwhile the council's imploding and those services are just not being provided.
And that's the problem when you have some councils with large budgets like that, and in the management, it's a very top-heavy management. When you get down to the people that actually do the jobs, it's very, very different. Now, I was really lucky and I worked for a council which didn't have a very top-heavy management structure and invested in the people around them and tried to look for savings amongst staff, amongst the properties that they owned, because they knew that government funding was going to dry up, and this was over 10 years ago. So they made that plan. Other councils have spent while the time is good and haven't saved for the future.
But you see, Nigel, when people get their rates, their demands coming in, they always look and they say, What am I paying that for? Where is that going? Why have I to pay that much?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing at least you can see now on your council tax bill is it'll actually show you where the money goes to. So you'll see the money that goes to the police, for instance, in your area. You'll get some idea of what you are paying for.
OK, right. Well, we're asking you at home, listening and watching, what would you like to see cut? What would you like to see be the sole responsibility? What would you like to see changed as regards
your bills going down?
Local council? gbviews@gbnews.com. We'll be back after this. Here's your weather update with Alex.